Hello there, and a very good afternoon. Welcome once again to our Q&A sessions, Professor Michael Clarke. Professor Clarke, how are you?
I'm very well.
Coping well enough in this weather?
I'm cool because I'm in studio.
It's nice to be in here. I'm in my full linens because it's sweltering out there. You can see.
This is the only respect in which I can be described as cool.
Yeah.
Nobody else would say that Professor Clarke is cool.
I don't know about that, Michael. Look, thank you all for being with us as always and for submitting your questions. We've got another mix of Iran questions and Ukraine war questions. Michael, I have to keep reminding myself as to where we are with this Iran war. We are in ceasefire. It seems to be holding. There have been discussions held. Just give us an overview of where you think we are with the Iran war for now, before we get into the questions.
Okay, well, we're on whatever it is, day 4 or day 5, depending on when you time it from, of the 60 days. So let's assume the 60 days began with the signing of the MOU. That was on Sunday night. So here we are on, what was it, Wednesday. So we're on, day 3, day 4 maybe, of the 60 days. Already, it's not going terribly well, but it is going.
Yeah.
Because both sides now disagree on what's being said. So the United States, both President Trump and Vice President Vance, are saying that the IAEA will have access to the nuclear sites.
Yeah.
And the Iranians say, no, they don't. They don't have any access to the nuclear sites. And the IAEA may go into Bushehr, which is not controversial. That's the site in the south. It's the only site that provides power to the Iranian grid. It's nothing to do with nuclear weapons as such. So they're disagreeing on that. They're disagreeing on whether the Strait of Hormuz is really open. It partly is, but partly isn't. So it's going to be hard going, for sure.
Was the IAEA were able to access sites under the JCPOA, weren't they?
They were.
In and out.
They were.
So this is the Iranians actually hardening their sort of stance.
But the Iranians always played games, so they tried to make it difficult for the IAEA. They claimed that the cameras that they put in the centrifuge halls were not working, and they wouldn't allow the IAEA back in to repair them, and they made all sorts of difficulties. So it was a constant battle, but it was a battle that over the period from 2015 when the deal was done and 2018 when the Americans walked out of it. It was a battle the IAEA were winning. The Iranians obviously thought they could fiddle their way right through to continuing to enrich uranium, and they couldn't.
Yep.
And so it's a constant battle. You never finish negotiating with the Iranians. Not with this Iranian regime. Everything is negotiation about another negotiation. And so it's a constant battle. And it goes back to what I think we said before in these forums, that Trump decided he was going to solve the Iran problem, just solve it. Well, you can't solve it. You have to manage it. If you can't solve a problem in diplomacy, you find ways of managing it. And that's what the world has been doing with the Iranian nuclear issue since it became relevant in about 2008, 2010. That's when they began to develop the real capabilities that worried the world. So we spent until then effectively managing the issue because nobody can deal with it, not at any sort of acceptable cost. And President Trump decided he was going to deal with it once and for all. Everybody else had ignored it, and he was right about that.
Yep.
People hadn't ignored it, but nobody had dealt with it. He was going to deal with it, but he's tried to deal with it in this very militaristic way, and everything's now worse than it was before. We're in a much worse position than we were in 2015. In reality, the US has lost this war. It lost it on the 7th of April when the military could do no more. What we're seeing now is a progressive surrender of the American position, which is getting weaker all the time. I won't go into why, but it's getting weaker all the time. I mean, I could go into why, but it'll take a little while.
Maybe we can do it later on.
All right.
Keep going.
So the American position weakens and weakens and weakens, and where we will be in 6 months or 8 months' time is back to managing the problem, not solving it, but in a situation that's worse than it was in 2015.
What an extraordinary few months we've had. All that money spent, all those lives lost to get to a situation
that's worse
than where it was.
And this is, and again, this will go down in history as America's third big strategic defeat. I mean, strategically defeated in Iraq, strategically defeated in Afghanistan, strategically defeated in Iran. That's what history will say.
Strategically defeated in Vietnam as well. Sorry, I just want to
yes,
add that.
Strategically defeated in Vietnam. I mean, I wasn't going back that far, but yes.
But certainly Middle Eastern wars, right? I mean, and for Trump as well, a man who, all that rhetoric about never getting into these kind of wars in the Middle East, and just for him to about face so quickly. We could spend a lot of time talking about that, but we're not going to...
History will judge.
It certainly will. I mean, he's going to be painted... He's the Iran war president.
This will be his legacy.
Thing.
Whatever else he thinks
Whatever
he's
else
done,
he does.
This is his legacy, and it's a pretty bad one.
Yeah. All right, so we're going to go to questions about development from overnight. The US Senate has curbed Donald Trump's powers with the War Powers Resolution. So Mark Portugal asks... Does the American president really have the power of office to attack Iran again, or must he seek permission? In other words, can he do whatever he wants?
Yeah, well, the War Powers Act goes back to what am I talking about? 1993, in which, that is right, isn't it? No, what am I saying?
73.
1973, I'm sorry, yeah, after the Vietnam War. So it goes back to 1973, and it allows the president to deploy forces for 60 days in warlike operations or war fighting before he or she, if it's a female president, has to go back to Congress and ask for authorization and explain what they're doing. And it's always been constitutionally a bit vague because in reality, every president since then has sidestepped it. On the 4 or 5 times it's come up. And interestingly, this is an inconvenient truth. Most of the presidents who sidestepped it have been Democratic presidents because they've been fighting sort of liberal interventionist wars, wars that they thought were for liberal humanitarian purposes, which then Congress has reacted against and they've sidestepped. So the first time it was invoked was in Somalia, where George Bush Sr., Republican, sent troops to Somalia, which Congress didn't like at all. They got trapped and they got engaged in the Somalian civil war, which is still going on. And both Bush Sr. and then Bill Clinton sidestepped Congress by saying, well, it's not really a war and we've got other sort of resolutions that covered it. Then it came up in Kosovo in 1999, and Bill Clinton again sidestepped it because he said that I'm making regular reports to Congress, and this is being done under other resolutions, like a UN resolution in NATO, which it was, and that was fine. Then it came up in 2014-15 with ISIS.
In Syria.
In Syria, and that was Obama. And it come up before that in Libya in 2011. That was Obama. And he said, well, we weren't fighting for more than 60 days. The campaign, we pulled out of the campaign. Others were fighting after that, but not us. And then it came up over ISIL. So all those presidents, mainly Democratic presidents, have sidestepped the issue. But they've always argued that there's a constitutional basis there. It just doesn't happen to be the War Powers Act. And this one is more serious in a way because for the first time, the Senate has really gone over on this. It was 48-50. You'd think it should be 48-52 because there's 100 senators, but a couple were ill. I think Mitch McConnell is one of them who was out of it for illness, and somebody else. And one of the Democrats actually voted with the Republicans.
Is that Fetterman?
Yeah. But four of the Republicans voted with the Democrats, including Bill Cassidy, Rand Paul. These are important characters. And Trump was furious about this. So the fact that the Senate has gone with a House resolution by 50 to 48 is a big political indicator. It won't affect what Trump is going to do, but it reinforces the idea that this war is now deeply unpopular with the American public, and that's what Congress is reflecting. But is Trump constitutionally prevented from going on? No, because his argument is that, well, we didn't fight for 60 days. We fought from the 28th of February to the 7th of April. And we're not fighting now, so we're not at war. And that could be sustainable.
You think so?
It's an argument, but politically, the pendulum is swinging against him for sure.
I think it is that political impact, isn't it? The fact that for the first time in his second term, it seems as if Congress, which has been completely acquiescent to all of his demands, is now deciding it's going to, in some way, throttle some of the things that he wants to do.
And if the midterms go against the Republicans, and at the moment they look as if they'll take a bit of a pounding, but they might take an absolute pounding because the economic damage from the war is still baked in. I mean, even if everything goes well from now on, the economic damage on inflation, on food prices, on gasoline prices, all of that is still to be fully felt between now and November. So it's possible that, and for us as well, of course, I mean, the consequences are less severe if fighting stops, but they still get more severe before they start to get better. And if the Republicans take a real pounding in November, and the Republicans, they're going to lose the House, but if they lose the House and the Senate, then Donald Trump's last 2 years will be incredibly frustrating for him because they'll just block everything. They'll stop him doing anything.
It could get worse. I was listening to a podcast.
And impeachment.
There you go, impeachment, because of what has been described as rampant corruption in his office.
Yeah, because it's so transparent. He says it's not corruption. It's corruption in plain sight by any other standard. So he might turn out to be the first president to be impeached 3 times.
I love that. And we could have to go through it all again, wouldn't we? But that,
Hey,
like
hey, Kamali, we'll miss him when he's gone.
will we? like
all
like a hole in the head.
all of the outrageous things that the world is reacting to with Donald Trump, we'll miss him when he's gone.
Such an extraordinary
Yeah,
time. What I find fascinating, just slight sidebar, he comes up in nearly every conversation I end up having, and it's just, sometimes I was at a party at the weekend with people who non-journalists,
Yeah.
and somehow, some way, we got around to Trump, and I said, no, let's
Yeah.
not talk about him, just because he's so sort of omnipresent on people's minds.
That's right.
So
There's a new book
effective.
out, which I haven't seen yet, just published, I think, this week, called Regime Change by a couple of American journalists, saying that this is a monarchy, that he is behaving like a monarch, and he's actually changing the regime. On the 250th anniversary
Yep.
of the American Republic, he's actually demolishing the Republic in favour of a monarchical figure. That's their argument, anyway.
It's one I'm sure many of our viewers will agree with. Let's move on to a question here from James Maher, who wants to know, what are the red lines for the US and Iran with regard to Israel's ongoing action in Lebanon? Will Iran pull out of talks, or will the US tell Israel to stop? Now, the thing about this is that Israel and Hezbollah did sign a ceasefire agreement a few days ago. But that ceasefire agreement is not based on the Israelis withdrawing. They hold
Yeah.
a large part of the south of Lebanon.
They do.
And I would imagine, as long as they are within the Lebanese borders, Hezbollah will find ways of hitting them. And
They will. Yeah, I mean,
stop.
Hezbollah's argument is that the Israeli forces have no business anywhere in Lebanon. The Israelis say, look, we have a natural right to occupy a strip of southern Lebanon because you keep firing rockets at our people in northern Israel. We moved 60,000 of them out for the best part of 2 years.
Yep.
We've moved them back. We're not going to move them out again. And you can understand that argument too. But in reality, all sides, I think, now appreciate that the Israelis are going to stay in some part of southern Lebanon. some sort of
That is
security
just agreed, is it now?
nobody's admitting that they've accepted it, but in reality they probably have. But it in a way, it's a sort of valve, a pressure valve that everyone can use.
Mm-hmm.
So the Iranians can say, whenever they want to, they can say, Israel has not honoured the peace agreement that was part of our MOU of last Sunday, because Item 1 was an immediate ceasefire, including in Lebanon.
Yeah.
Right, and they say that means that we assume that the Israelis are going to withdraw. The fact that the Israelis won't withdraw gives the Iranians an ability, anytime they want to say, oh, well, the peace deal is not being honoured. Mm-hmm. They're not going to say that if it suits them to stay in the process. But when the point comes where they want to get out of the process or put the process under pressure, that's what they will say. Mm-hmm. And equally, Hezbollah can say, we have a right to target Israeli forces, if not northern Israel. We have a right to target Israeli forces sitting on our territory. They can do that. And the Israelis can always say, we are not targeting Hezbollah, we are just asserting our right to have a security zone to protect our people. So everyone has a little bit of common sense on their side.
Yeah, interesting.
And the situation will not go to what it is in theory supposed to go to, which is a complete return to the status quo ante of the ceasefire that we had in, was it October last year. So it gives everyone a sort of a pressure point they can use when they want to make their, to put pressure on the whole peace deal, the MOU, the big thing between Iran and the United States. It's not necessarily a showstopper,
right,
unless one of the sides wants it to be.
Well, that's the point of the question. Is that,
Yeah.
is there a red line there? Can something? I mean, there were a few weeks ago when we were having this discussion. I did ask whether or not you thought the Iranians would come in to try and support Hezbollah, and actually it was proven that they did. That when there was an attack on Hezbollah targets, the Iranians fired a few missiles at the Israelis to say no more.
To make it clear,
Yeah.
make it clear. And that's the point. I think it will be if they say a running saw, which all sides will use when it suits them to pressurize the others. So it's not a showstopper, but it is not. It's not satisfactory. It allows this. It's a pressure point for everybody. Yeah.
Do you think, to James's question, it will? It could mean the breakdown of the talks between the US and Iran?
Not necessarily. That's the point. If the Iranians feel that they can get more sanctions relief by staying in the talks, they'll certainly take it beyond the 60 days. And by the end of 60 days, the United States will not be able to go back to war. I mean, they might, but they'll find it increasingly difficult. As I say, the
midterms are coming up.
The US, the midterms are coming up. They'll be 2 months nearer to them. congressional opinion is what it is. The economy is what it is.
Yep.
It will be very difficult for Donald Trump to go back to some sort of all-out attack. And what will it achieve that he hadn't achieved by the 7th of April? As I say, they lost the war on the 7th of April because military force could do no more unless he was prepared to destroy Iran in some more fundamental way and get into a full-scale US-Iranian war that would be open-ended in every other respect. So that's very, very unlikely. So I think the United States will stay in this process after 60 days. The Iranians will certainly stay in the process after 60 days. And we go back to where we were, which is open-ended, endless negotiations with the Iranians, where we try to close off all their avenues of nuclear development as and when they arise. It's a kind of whack-a-mole strategy, in which we try to legitimize the process, get the IAEA in as much as possible, get the allies involved as much as possible, get China to lean on the Iranians as much as possible. It's good old-fashioned diplomacy of managing a problem you can't solve.
It can't be solved militarily, in your opinion. I mean, what what can actually be done with Hezbollah? I mean, obviously they're a powerful militia force, politically very powerful as well, large numbers of supporters. It's not going to be a case of them being destroyed by warfare, is it? I mean,
no, they won't.
And I'm pretty sure, I mean, you'll correct me on this, but the Lebanese government, as it is, without Hezbollah, would probably not want them there, or do they? What's the relationship?
No, the
like?
Lebanese would love Hezbollah to disappear.
So why isn't there more sort of help for the Lebanese army to have them rooted out?
The Israelis could have spent 20 years not helping the Lebanese army to do that, or even covertly helping them, let alone overtly. And they're only now are they starting to talk about the idea, well, we will help the Lebanese disarm Hezbollah in order to please the United States. And they're not really doing very much in that regard because Hezbollah is now so deeply entrenched. In a strategic sense, what would you need to sort of to deal with the Hezbollah problem? Two things. One is to work to get the Iranians to withdraw their support,
right.
So break the link between Tehran and Hezbollah. And then the second thing is to work with the regional partners to increase the real power of the Lebanese government. So the Jordanians could help, the Israelis could help, although they have to be careful. The new Syrian government could help, which might be to their advantage as well. And so you've got to build up the Iranians, the Lebanese, and get the Iranians to choke off their political and financial support. And then the unpopularity of Hezbollah. I mean, just like Hamas. They run a reign of terror against the people they claim to protect, and they gain popularity throughout the Arab world as the only people who are prepared to really go against the Israelis.
Well, they're the ones that have shown themselves to be able to fight.
Yeah, and they do, and they've been very good. Yeah. And if you look, I mean, in southern Lebanon, some of these tunnels which the Israelis have discovered, make the Hamas tunnels look amateur.
They're extraordinary. I'm just looking at the pictures now. If you can find these pictures, I mean, the AP have been there, the BBC have been in parts of southern Lebanon as well. It's just extraordinary imagery. They're a really powerful force, but I can't be the one having the idea. There are sort of plans in place, but there's probably not enough sort of will to
no, there isn't. And that's the problem. I mean, Lebanon is not a viable enough state.
Right.
It doesn't have enough of its own resources and its own hard power to maintain control over all of its territory. So the Lebanese government has a certain amount of control over Beirut and a little bit over the north of the country, and less control the further south you go from Beirut.
Let's move on to the next question here from Sean Glynn. What benefit would Iran get if they delay the ceasefire, and what's in it for the IRGC to end the conflict quickly?
Yeah, no, they don't want to. I mean, they don't need to. They have survived, and their objective now is to continue to survive as a regime against their own people. And given that Iran has been grievously wounded by this war as a country and as an economy, they have an incentive now to keep the momentum going, to release sanctions, to get the assets unfrozen, about $120 billion worth of frozen assets around the world in a number of countries, 20 billion in China, for instance. And there's this wonderful $6 billion in Qatar that were released by South Korea years ago, and they only got as far as Qatar. And in 2023, they were never accessed.
Really?
I mean, in opposition, Trump was madly criticising Biden, having given them $6 billion. They didn't get a penny of it. They didn't get a cent of it. It's still sitting in Qatar, but the Qataris are now releasing it, or at least it's now become available. So there's 120 billion's worth of assets that they want released. They want their oil to flow. I mean, 57% of their foreign export earnings are oil. It all has to flow. All of their oil has to go out through the Strait of Hormuz, one way or another. A little bit goes from Jas, but it all has to go through the Gulf. And if that can start to flow again, then they can start to recreate their economy. But they'll be recreating an economy in which everything is now channeled through the IRGC.
Throughout sort of the past 10, 20 years, with all those sanctions on Iran, you had this sort of malevolent theocracy that was running it. And there was always this sense that, if the sanctions were lifted, what kind of impact would that malevolent theocracy have? But now what we've got is a military junta ruling it, who have, I mean, they're not expansionist, are they? But they're sort of more hard line. They're much tougher, wouldn't you say, than what was perhaps there
They're
before.
not imperialist in the sense that they're not trying to take over other countries in a way that the Russians are and the United States would like to, if you think about Greenland. And the Chinese are certainly imperialist in their views of what they want in the South China Sea and the Taiwan Strait. They're not imperialist in that sense, but they want to survive, and they have a revolution to further the Islamic revolution. And they're into, I mean, by some analyses, they're into the third Islamic revolution now. You can say this is that Muqtada Khamenei is the embodiment, assuming he's still alive, and which he seems to be, and he will continue to be there for a while, one way or another, that he embodies the third Islamic revolution since 1979. And so their objectives are to make Iran, this 90 million people in a modern, well-educated, dynamic country with a wonderful, wonderful culture, back 3,000-year culture, to make that the Islamic revolution as an example to the Muslim world, to the Shia Muslim world. So they're not expansionist, which is not to say they won't hit their neighbours, as they will, as they've shown. So to protect their revolution, they go to war with their neighbours for sure. They just have, but they don't want to take them over.
No, but they, after these days of war, they're actually going to come out of this stronger.
Internally, yes. I mean, stronger internally and politically. But as we've said before, I think a reckoning with the majority of the Iranian population, those 70 million or so, who hate their rulers. They detest, they loathe their government, and they're brutally suppressed by them. And I think there is a reckoning. And I mean, now there's. I was reading it only yesterday. I've forgotten the young lady's name. She's a singer. She's a young Iranian singer, and she's sentenced to being flogged. 70 lashes.
Extraordinary.
For singing. I mean, it's just obscene.
It really is. I had a representative from Reza Pahlavi on my show a couple of days ago, and they are still massively optimistic. I mean, I put the challenge to him that they have been massively let down, but they still maintain the hope, as you say, that in years to come.
But my fear is, my prediction is, sadly, is that when this popular revolution does occur in Iran, it's going to be very violent. Because these people in power now, these basically, brutal old men who are so frightened of young women, they won't go. They will go quickly after a lot of violence. There will be a lot of violence, and then they'll just disappear to the bolt holes that they've all got ready. But before that point arises, it won't be a peaceful transfer of power, I'm sure.
No. Kind of in the same area as we've been discussing, Mike. There's a question here from Big G. Scott, who says, after calls for the Revolutionary Guards to lay down arms and surrender, and the population to take over the country, that was by Trump, of course, on the 28th of February, has Trump let down those 80 million Iranians and left them in greater peril than ever before? He also asks, and with an emboldened Iran, has Trump just botched this chance?
Yes, I mean, I'm sure he didn't understand the importance of what he was saying when he said in January, was about January the 4th and 5th, wasn't it? Not long after
when they were on the streets.
Oh yes, when they come out on the streets before the massacres started or the clampdown started that may have killed around 30,000. That's the top figure. It might not have been quite that many, but certainly before the brutal clampdown, and he was making these statements saying that hold on, help is on the way, and we all said, what on earth could he possibly mean by that? And I was asked that question a couple of times on Sky News, and I said, well, look at what he's got in the area. It's neither here nor there. I mean, there's no carrier battle group there. There's a few mine clearance vessels, and there's bits and pieces, but basically they've taken a lot of their force away from the area, so it was not clear what could possibly come of that. And it just reminded me at the time, I remember, I think I was on with Jane Secker, And I said it reminded me of when George Bush Sr., after the 1991 war, said things which encouraged the marsh Arabs of Iraq, people in the Shatt al-Arab waterway, which is, of course, the Iran-Iraq waterway, and the Kurds in northwest Iraq to rise up. And they did,
And then,
thinking that the West was going to help them, and the West wasn't. And people said, what on earth was he talking about? You know, why encourage people to take on a brutal dictator if you're not prepared to come in and do what you imply?
Yeah.
And that's exactly what Trump seemed to do. It was, I mean, so twice, once in Iraq and now once in Iran, the United States has encouraged people to come out on the streets in front of a brutal dictatorship and then stood by while the brutal dictatorship does what they do.
Yeah. Just to go back to what you were saying about this singer, just found the article around. Her name is Parastu Ahmadi.
That's Ahmadi.
Yeah, she's going to be sentenced to 74 lashes.
74 lashes,
for performing without a hijab, and her band will also be stopped from leaving the country or for performing for the next 2 years because she had the temerity to sing without wearing hijab.
Ahmadi, that's right. And they said their songs were vulgar. They were songs, apparently. They were wistful songs about love and the country and the culture. It's incomprehensible to me how they could do that. But of course, they do it. I mean, maybe the sentence will be commuted. They do it to have an effect on everyone else, to frighten everyone else.
It's terrifying.
The one thing that young women mustn't do is sing. Unbelievable.
Yeah. Okay, let's move on to a question from. Oh, sorry about this, Bob. I kind of asked you a question for you, didn't I? Bob asked, can Lebanon actually disarm Hezbollah? And if it could, wouldn't it have already done so by now? I mean, do you have anything more to say on that?
Not really. Only size matters. I mean, the Lebanese army is about 70 or 80,000, and Hezbollah claim about 50,000 fighters and another 50,000 they could turn out if necessary. Now, those figures are probably inflated, but I bet the Lebanese army couldn't turn out 80,000, even conscripted people properly.
I was going to say, and what, people willing to fight?
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
I mean, go into civil war. So, I mean, the real figures might well be half in both cases. I mean, you might be talking about 40,000 Lebanese army figures who are really available and maybe 30 or 40,000 Hezbollah. But the point is, they're roughly comparable. And you would imagine that Hezbollah probably could turn out more people if it came to an active civil war than the Lebanese government. That's the bottom line. So the Lebanese government on its own is simply not physically capable of suppressing Hezbollah by forceful means. It would have to be, in some other political series of maneuvers in which it would need a lot of external help to lean on Iran, lean on Israel, provide Lebanon with a lot more help than it is getting. And then, Lebanon's own political system, which is this delicate balance between all of the different ethnic and religious groups, and is still very corrupt and it's very inefficient. I mean, the whole system has got somehow to be reformed. And that plea for Lebanese reform is made probably every other year over the last 20-odd years.
I mean, people will remember that huge explosion at the docks that just sort of,
in Beirut,
rocked the country. While the government had no way of being able to...
And it was fertilizer, and it was pure negligence. It was about equivalent to 1 kiloton, actually. It was a 1 kiloton explosion, equivalent.
The country was a basket case before that, but it was just
devastated,
just so indicative,
Beirut
wasn't it?
port area, sheer incompetence.
All right, and now they're at war. We'll, of course, come back to Iran next week. Let's move on to Ukraine now. And this is fascinating. When I saw this reporting a few days ago, I thought, what is happening here? So, President Zelensky has set an ultimatum to the Belarusian leader, Lukashenko, telling him to remove drone guidance equipment from Belarus. Colonel and Ethan have asked this question, both. So, Colonel wonders whether Belarus will acquiesce. Will they comply with the request? And Ethan wonders if this is actually, if they follow Stallin's ultimatum, is actually a second front that's opening up. I mean, what's going on here?
Yeah, I mean, there's always a problem for the Ukrainians. I mean, the Belarusians aid the Russians, as they did from the very beginning of the invasion in February 2022. But they don't aid them that far, partly because they can't, and also because Lukashenko is also trying to lean away from Putin a little bit, because the Americans are interested in pulling him away. And the Trump administration, for its own nefarious reasons, but actually quite usefully, is interested, because they're interested in the resources of Belarus, and they think they could do deals with Belarus.
Yeah.
And Belarus itself is not quite as close to Putin as it was in 2022. And although again, Lukashenko is the old, the last full dictator of Europe. They used to say he's certainly the oldest and the longest serving. Goes back before Putin. But he's a canny sort of character, and he's prepared to sort of try to play both sides at once. But the Ukrainians got to be really careful. Right. I mean, if the threats, I understand why they make these threats. If their threats resulted in Belarus taking a more active role in the war, in allowing themselves to be used as a drone monitoring station for the Russians, it's not clear what the Ukrainians could do about that. Because if they attack Belarus itself, they might find that they're without a certain amount of international support for it.
You think so?
It would be difficult. I mean, it's quite hard. I think everyone would advise them, please don't do that, or try to counter it in some other way. I mean, attacking inside Russia, we think that's fine. They attacked you. If the Belarusians are aiding the Russians, but not actively involved as such, should you attack them? It's a really difficult one.
Yeah.
And I think Belarus and Putin, they know that they're posing difficult political questions for Zelensky.
Yeah, they definitely are. And actually, Zelensky's taken on a bit of the Trump, who set himself a deadline. It's given him a week.
He has,
so we're counting down. I think 3 days ago.
Danger for him is that he's quite chipper at the moment. Things are going quite well for the Ukrainians on several fronts, not decisively, but things are moving in their favour. And the danger is he'll overstate it, that he'll overextend his sense of political confidence and come a cropper. So I do worry about this one. I have
Interesting.
To say. Yeah.
One to watch. I mean,
very much so. Yeah. On a separate note, the Ukrainians are developing drones now, particularly their Hornet drones, which is US design, which doesn't need communications from GPS or with the operator.
It's AI enabled.
Do it all by AI.
Yeah.
It can target by AI, and the Russians can't do anything about that. And so these big units that the Russians have developed to block Starlink, which do work. They can block Starlink to a depth of like 40 or 50 kilometers in the areas that they operate, but it's having no effect on these particular Hornet drones because they don't need Starlink. It's really interesting the way the Ukrainians are way ahead of them technologically. And of course, this is the beginning of autonomous warfare, real autonomous warfare. Because as these drones, these Hornet drones, when they get over their target area, they work out their own targets. If they're still in connection with their operator, the operator sets them off, but then is not required. If they're still in connection with their operator, they'll ask the operator, is it okay to attack these targets? Wow. But if they're not in connection with the operator, they're mandated just to attack the targets as they see fit.
They draw the box and they set this.
That's right.
This kill zone.
If you've lost connection with us, with me on the ground, do what you think. What you, artificial intelligence, think. That is pure autonomous warfare. We've been warning about this or talking about it for the last 20 or 30 years, the arrival of autonomous warfare. And we've seen it in sort of gun systems. Naval guns have to make their own decisions about you engage in so many targets at once with the turret swinging round. It's too quick for an operator to say go for that one, then go for that one. So they make their own decisions about what to hit, what to leave, what to go for first. That's an autonomous system, but it's still got a human at the other end. There's only a small stage from going from that to saying we've lost our communication with you, you fight the war. True. And that's what Meteor drones are now doing. Yeah,
and it's the offensive as well, because the defensive for that turret gun is kind of taking down targets that are coming in. This is
exactly
this
is an offensive system. Yeah, we always knew we'd be at this point, and it looks as if it's this to me is quite a big development. The Meteor drone. I think there are other examples, but this is the one that has really held my attention. Because if somebody says to me, "Are we now in the world of genuinely autonomous warfare, robotic autonomous?" Yep, we are. It's started. The process has started. We've been waiting for it to start, but now it's started.
So isn't war like the locomotive of history or something?
Yeah, I know. I mean, ultimately, a human being has to take responsibility. A human being is morally responsible for the command decision to say, I sent the drones off to work in that sort of kilometre square box. So somebody is still legally and morally responsible. But the actual target, if there was a civilian there, if there was a school there, if there was a young child on a bike or something, the AI, would they discriminate? No, probably not.
Of course not.
Almost certainly
we've seen mistakes when humans are fully
That's
involved.
right.
We saw what happened in the first days of the Iran war, where that school was bombed and those 100-and-something children
That's right.
killed.
And that's an intelligence failure. And that was an AI intelligence failure. That that building had been a government building, but it changed functions, become a school, and the intelligence didn't know that. And so they did intend to bomb it because they misinterpreted what that building was now being used for.
You've got me on this now, Michael. Look, this autonomous warfare, as you said, was always going to come, but it's come at such a time when international law is probably the weakest it's been, certainly in my lifetime. And if that is, if we're going to be allowing these machines to go and pick targets and
fight their own war,
with just one individual that perhaps is in the kill chain at some point, you can see quite quickly how, without there being strict rules of engagement, this could be really, really dangerous. And those kind of rules of engagement seem to have been slightly fraying, certainly in this one, in other wars.
You're absolutely right. I mean, international law is weaker now than it's ever been in our lifetimes. Militaries in the West are worrying about this a lot, because they see the problems coming down the road. They see the sort of questions of responsibility in their own systems. I mean, Parliament saying this is not acceptable, we don't want to be involved in this sort of war, makes our war illegal. You can imagine all the issues. So we worry about it a lot. Our adversaries don't.
No, they do not.
And there is no global attempt yet to get hold of autonomous systems. The UN has got stuff, and the UN's been talking about this for a long time. They've done some good reports in the last 10 years with lots of recommendations, all of which I said, oh, very good, put them on one side.
Put them in the drawer.
Yeah, so it's not that people are not concerned with it, and it's not that there are not national protocols, and we are strengthening and thinking through all of our national protocols, as are most of the Western countries. But that doesn't make them international protocols. No. That's the problem. And we live in a world now where the international protocols for most things are breaking down.
We could do a whole episode on that sort of thing. Maybe we should one day.
Let's cheer ourselves up in some other way,
We're staying with Ukraine. Question here from John, who says that he read one of the four fortress cities is in trouble. Could we be at a turning point there?
Oh, I mean, he must mean Kostiantynivka.
Kostiantynivka is
in the south,
yeah.
So the four of them, which we mentioned lots of times.
I always have them in front of me. I know you.
Here we go.
I'm reading them, but you.
Slaviansk, from north to south. Slaviansk, Kramatorsk, Druzkivka, and Kostiantynivka. That's the fun one to say.
Always impresses me.
Kostiantynivka. Yeah. So Kostiantynivka has been. It's not lost yet, but it is under pressure, which it never used to be. It used to be the sort of safe place when Bakhmut was in contention. And so people I used to speak to who are in Bakhmut, they say, oh, when we get out to Kosti, and we do all our R&R there, and we rework our stuff there, and we get ourselves ready, and then we come back from Kosti back into Bakhmut. And so now Kostiantynivka is in that situation. But it's not lost. It is one of the fortress cities. I think that what I understand is that the Russians they haven't made any progress on that for the last 2 months. Some Ukrainian units have got in behind them. They've got into the east of Kostiantynivka. And certainly they've got in behind the Russians at Shavizhar as well, which is again one of the sort of satellites to Kostiantynivka, which is the high ground. The Ukrainians are doing okay there, but it's not the safe place it used to be. It's a fortress city. It's like a fortress with only the military there. Whereas Slaviansk, Kramatorsk still got populations there living their lives as best they can. Kosti is now it's a battle city. So it is a fortress. The battlements are still there, but only soldiers are behind it.
Extraordinary. Just looking at some of the pictures of Kostiantynivka right now, and it just...
Yeah. And the Russians do what they always do. They bombard a city to rubble and then move in and take over the rubble. That's what they're trying to do to Kostiantynivka.
In those kind of conditions.
But if the Ukrainians continue to be successful, they may be able to push the Russians back towards really Donetsk. It's 50 miles or so. But if they can get them, another 10 or 15 miles away, they'll be out of artillery range, which is quite important.
All right, we're going to move on to the final question here, Michael. It's a bonus question, come from Daniel Parks. And I do like this one.
Oh, all right, go on.
It puts you into government, which I know is a place where many of our viewers would actually like you to be. So if you were Secretary of State for Defence and you had free reign rather than being obligated to implement the defence investment plan, what would your priorities be? what are the urgent shortfalls, and what's the best way to strengthen our defences?
Yeah, I spent yesterday in the RUSI Land Warfare Conference, the big army conference that RUSI runs, and Dan Jarvis, our new Secretary for Defence, made his first presentation there.
How was he received?
He was very good. Yeah, he was very good. I mean, and it was all on the. Most of that conference is off the record. Mm-hmm. But his stuff was all on the record because it was a statement he wanted to make, and he was very assertive and very, very, very convincing. And he said, he smiled. He said, "People ask me why I agreed to do this job." And he said, "I agreed because I was asked. I'm a soldier.
Yeah, going to get on with my job."
He was a Marine.
Yeah.
He said, "They asked me, so I say yes. It's for my country. Even though it's a job which a lot of people say, well, I wouldn't want." So, okay, if I was Defence Secretary, and the Defence Investment Plan was, what the MOD wanted it to be. If the money was there, that's the question.
Yeah. If you had free reign, and the amount is 28 billion. Is that what the Chief of Defence
over 4 years? Over 4 years to implement the plan with the government, which the government agreed to over a year ago.
Yeah,
that's what it would now take to keep the plan on track. Not let alone to do anything really fancy. Keep the plan on track. Instead of which, what they're being offered in reality is 10 billion over 4 years. In reality. That was why John Healey resigned.
Yeah,
they said it was 13.5, but it wasn't. It was 10.
It's not nearly enough.
And John Healey had said, "Look, we could live with 18, not the 28. We could live with 18 and somehow make it work." And they said, "Well, you can have 13.5, but actually 3.5 is funny money, so it's only 10 in cash." Anyway,
right.
All right. So if there were no restraints, what would my priorities be? Well, I'd say 3 priorities in big terms. One would be all of the transformational stuff. The British forces have got to transform themselves into what modern militaries have got to be, and that's the Americans call it a kill chain, which sounds a bit inelegant, but I think we know what we mean. I think we call it the digital target web.
Right.
It's the same sort of thing. It's not a single system. It's a system of systems whereby the Army, Navy, Air Force are all able to build their systems in a way that are compatible with each other and which are AI enabled, which has great data fusion in them, particularly data fusion from satellites, which we need more of, which has what's called tactical ISR, which is intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance, ISR. And at the tactical level, you can bring all those things together and make decisions really quickly, and then get your systems, get your weapons on target really fast. I mean, literally within minutes, not hours, minutes. So that sort of digital targeting web is the first priority, making all of that work. And there's lots of things that, of course, go with that. And data fusion is one of the big ones. The second big priority would be ammunition. Just ammunition stocks. I mean, the military need more of everything, but ammunition in particular. And again, I was hearing some figures yesterday about the number of drones we are testing, and we've got the Army have got this Asgard system, as it's called, which looks very good. And everything I've seen about Asgard is impressive. It is 21st century digital battlefield management. But when I hear the numbers of what we're testing with, I think, well, that's all good. But in a conflict, we've got to scale those numbers up tenfold.
Yeah.
Instead of having tens of these weapons, we need hundreds of them. Instead of having the hundreds you talk about, we need several thousand. And, I mean, what was being said yesterday, and this was a comment that was on the record, I think, but I won't attribute it to who was saying it, is that we were given a 10-year, the SDR, the Strategic Defence Review, creates a 10-year program for modernisation, and we're now given a 5-year horizon for conflict. So, we think we can bring ourselves up to a point where we can fight and prevail in a war, which we can thereby deter in 10 years, but we're now given a 5-year horizon in which we think we might find ourselves in major conflict with the Russians. And so we've somehow got to squeeze this 10-year program, which we're not even funding properly, down to a 5-year program. So that's why we need more ammunition of everything.
Yeah.
And then my third priority would be personnel. It's the boys and girls. I mean, we always call them boys and girls. It's a sort of an affectionate way of, because the people on the front line are young men and women who commit themselves. And honestly, Kamali, I've been to many frontline units in all 3 services. I've never been to a frontline unit without being really moved by their commitment and their ability to just do it. Get on with it and do it. They're terrific, really terrific. So I'd spend it on them and the conditions in which they serve and the housing, the education. It's fallen so far behind. I'd spend it on them.
I can see how emotional that makes you, Michael. Look, they do need more support and funding. I suppose there's been a sense that with peace dividends, we don't really think enough about them.
No, we don't. Well, we always try to manage the problem. Again, we say, okay, well, we can get by with service housing, we get by with allowances, and we've made some improvements. But in order to attract more boys and girls onto the front line, they need to see it as worthwhile, patriotic, worth doing, but also something that they can function in. But it doesn't take them out of society; it gives them something extra in society.
Yeah.
And if you're going to attract some of the best, and it's not just attracting people to the trenches. There's some of that, but you've got to attract the people who can operate the targeting kill web or the digital targeting web. You've got to attract the people who are the innovators, who can work with procurement, who can work with making. I mean, as in Ukraine, making drones work terrifically well. Really reinventing them every 3 or 4 weeks. In effect, is what they've done. You've got to attract the best of our society in that 18 to 28-year-old cohorts.
Yeah.
And then those who stay in the system, become more senior, they become more military in their way. But it's the boys and girls, it's the frontline people, frontline in a broader sense, that are the most important.
There's not much discussion about the personnel as well in sort of the conversation around the defence investment plan and how important it is to attract people to the armed forces. I mean, we had a little bit of talk a year or so ago from John Healy about sort of getting people in sort of reservist capacities, trying to get more people through the armed forces, but still very little sort of...
Well, again, we're waiting for the DIP to find out what they're going to spend on it.
Right.
So we need reserves. We need a more active reserve of at least, say, 30,000, which can be expanded quite quickly up to maybe 150,000. So it can balloon upwards as and when you need to bring people in. And it goes back to the old adage. It sounds brutal when you say it, but it's true. The professional armies start wars, but citizen armies finish them. And our strategy is not to lose early and to buy time for our society to wind itself up to the commitment required to prevail in a major European war. That's the situation. We never thought we'd be back in this situation, but we are. We are. It's much more typical of the situation that our ancestors faced for generations. We've had a break from it all. From the last 2 generations have had a very lucky time. The next 2 generations are going to be back to the old routine of our professional army buys us time, our professional forces buy us time to mobilize, to meet whatever the threat is to our existence and our freedom.
Extraordinary moment in history we find ourselves. We'll stop there for this week, Michael. Always appreciate it, man. Thank you so much for that. And thank you all for being with us again. We will make sure we can get diaries aligned.
Yep.
We're doing another one of these